Okay, we have a number of questions for our folks. And unless it's specifically or directly at someone in particular, these are general questions. Wow, so there's some really great questions here, so thank you very much for that. And there's a lot of them. I promise we'll get to as many of them as possible before lunch. So the first question for the four of you is, how did you get people to take you seriously enough to make a difference?
It started with me taking myself seriously. Because if you wait for somebody to take you seriously, it might literally mean the difference between life and death. And in my case, it sure was. It's not that my parents didn't love me or my physician didn't care for me. It just wasn't part of their consciousness. Mental health is part of the human experience. And so I still remember the day sitting in this therapist's office off of Northwest Cornell Road. And after yet another suicide attempt, her telling me that I can't keep you alive. You've got a disease that is going to compel you to take your life, and you've got to educate yourself and walk away from everything that your culture taught you or the world is teaching you about what mental illness is. And you've got to educate and empower yourself to choose life. And so I turned to my husband and I said, I'm going to go get hospitalized today. I know I'm very, very sick. And the first question he had for me was, what are we going to tell our friends? I am still married. He's a very loving man. For all of you women that were just going, oh my God, 36 years of marriage. That question is a question most loved ones will ask, if they were being honest, right? And so I have had enough of a marriage of 36 years to reflect back and see the pain and the suffering and the confusion and the fear in that question, right? So that day was the day that I was born again. To take a deep breath and look into his eyes and saying, the truth, dear. From here on out, I will speak the truth. So that's my answer.
I would say that I just put a lot of work into volunteering with different organizations, mental health organizations. I was volunteering as a co-facilitator for a young adult support group at NAMI, and I was also a volunteer crisis counselor with Crisis Text Line. I was working on building my so-called resume to kind of show that beyond just living with mental illness, but that I was working towards educating myself on this topic. And it's funny because my stepdad, he's like, well, you know, you're going on these speaking engagements, but you don't have a degree in this. Like, how are people going to take you seriously? And that's a little bit of part of why I went back to school, but I also just had to believe in the power of my story and the power of my words. I, as a peer, as someone with lived experience, I think that alone is sufficient to have lived through these things and found ways to cope and found ways to just find connection with other people. I think that alone is sufficient, and very much like you said, it's believing in the validity of yourself.
I think for me, it was just, you know, just taking responsibility and learning to live in my truth. I know how much time I put into things that were important to others, you know, academics, my family, them getting me started. Then me playing sports and realizing how I have this discipline, you know, to get out when my friends are playing around. I have this discipline in myself. And so when I was like really on the dark side of things and, you know, I realized, oh my God, you know, this person is not here for me in my head. This is what my mind's telling me. I realized, you know what, I have to apply the same effort, you know, and I call it my protocol that I did to, you know, the academics, athletics. I have to apply this to my real life and, you know, really try to just step up and start to learn how to take care of myself. And that started with education, like you said. You know, they told me all these different diagnoses, and at 33, my final one, the one that I, you know, take medication for that's really helped is bipolar disorder. So I had to go research this. You know, I didn't want to go to psychiatrists and stuff like that, and it's like one meeting and they're like, take this. And sometimes it's been like that for me, and I'm like, why are they giving me this? I've been given raw medication and certain things I wasn't supposed to have taken because the athletic side of me, didn't have energy and things like that. So I just really started to educate myself and read up on things, and that's when I felt like I started to get my power back.
I don't know that I ever, because I toured this show that was so funny, I guess, on the outside. I guess I was so used to people not taking me seriously that I was like, well, I'm just going to do this show and you're going to take me seriously as an artist. And for the 8 years on and off I was touring the show, I didn't realize how much in denial I still was about the issue. In the show, I frame it as, hi, I'm Christina Wong, and this is a show of fiction. It's all fiction. And for my parents, it was mostly a mechanism I built for them so that they could kid themselves into believing that this over-the-top what's it called? This over-the-top preface that it's fiction was real. Of course, it wasn't real. You know, if I'm going on for like 15 minutes that the show that you're about to watch is fiction, and it wasn't only until recently when I decided to go back to therapy after having so many negative experiences in it, and went in and said, this is what I want. I don't want you to give me a bunch of standardized tests. I don't want you to see me through the lens of some research thing that you read about Asian people in therapy. Like, I just want you to kind of understand me right here as me, and this is what I demand of my care. And that's sort of when I felt like people were beginning to take me more serious, when I was able to advocate for myself.
So, Christina, you're already kind of speaking to this, but this is a question that's specifically for you.
Okay.
What besides your comedy, which is awesome, has helped you with your depression and mental illness?
Well, I got November 9th, 2016, I was like, I'm really depressed. And I don't know if you were there too, but I happened to be here in Portland, and I was like, let me go into this dispensary. And I was like, okay, this is what's going on. I'm having family issues. I'm like basically talking to a 22-year-old with a septum piercing about all my symptoms. And she's like, well, you could try this, mix it more sativa, and then there's indica. And I was just like, oh, okay. And my therapist was like, do you want to just go on, like, I know you really have been resisting taking psych meds, but do you want to go try Prozac? And I was like, yes. And so basically it took this administration for me to go on Prozac. And it's been great, because I'm still here. Thank you. So brave. So brave to go into a dispensary, I know. But I mean, so I actually don't announce it too much, but, you know, I'm among friends. But also I think I think understanding the power that I have as a public person, I think for a long time I was very jaded, and it was reflected back to me like, oh, of course you got grants for this. You're an Asian woman. Of course people are bringing you to speak. You're like as if I was just like sort of token higher. And I began to internalize that and feel like I was an ambulance chaser that was just showing up at spaces to talk about this sad issue. And I've really began to really step in my power and go, this is really powerful and profound, and I need to own this power and not just feel bad about the fact that I've been given this opportunity. Yep.
If any of you are wondering where our darling Susie is, you know, her stub toe, she was scheduled to leave sooner, so she must have just left back home. And let's give her a round of love, okay?
So for the whole group, what is the most important thing a therapist or mental health provider has ever said to you? And also, thank you for speaking your truth.
A therapist who I didn't like a few years ago did point out, you seem to value saving money over your own mental health. And that was what? Like, what are you talking about? I'm Chinese. Of course, you know, my life isn't worth, you know, this amount of money. If I can save this amount of money but just buck through it, that's what it is. And that was a big aha. And I remember that was something I had to report back to my mother. And she was, she's still in denial, but that was important for someone to point out to me that I wasn't putting value, that I had been raised to believe that my life had had a monetary value, and that was my value to the world, and it's not, obviously.
Let me see. I think for me, one of the greatest things that my therapist probably told me, and it was this woman. Let me explain. Therapy for me has been interesting because, you want to connect with your therapist. And so I learned personally, just because they send you to someone doesn't mean that you have to stay there, your provider, whoever. If it doesn't match up, you got to be able to connect with this person. And for me, I was like, man, to be honest, how does this white woman from rural America think that she can understand where I'm from when I try to say, hey, you know what, have you been to New York one time? So I felt like she couldn't identify with me, right? Little did I know she had some tricks up her bag, in her bag. And she basically, she brought me in, she explained her life. It was kind of like parallel from a rural sense. So I got to know her. And then she would always write. She's always look at me intensely. They all write. She would write. And I can remember the day she kicked me out of therapy. And she said something to me. She said, let me show you something. She said, first of all, when you first came in, you always sat on the edge of your seat and rapid. You're just talking. And she goes, you know what? The last couple months you sat back, your legs crossed, and we talk about life, and we really don't talk about you a whole lot. That's why I know you needed not to be here. And she goes, but she showed it to me. That's the thing. I saw when she marked it and she walked me through it, how she saw how I've changed as a person. And I was just amazed. And I started to think, wow, she's right. And so when she told me, Shamikwa, you have to learn you develop a great skill set. This is what she said. And she goes, you know how to cope now. You have to go out into the world. And she explained to me how people sometimes get addicted to their therapy because of their own fear. Y'all want to keep her. I want to keep coming. And she said, you know what? I'm a phone call away. Go out into this world. And that's probably been 2 years ago. And I probably talked to her 6 times. And those 6 times that we've talked, one was just a little crisis situation. But the other 5 times are, how are you? How's your family? So she was great.
So this wasn't something that my own therapist told me, but it was something that I was talking about with a friend who is a therapist, and she was talking about how she really opens up therapy, acknowledging her privilege as someone who is imparting her help in this role, and also acknowledging who she is as a person. And so she's a Latina from the Bronx, the South Bronx, and she just acknowledging what she's gone through and also her privileges. She also shared about how, there's this idea that the mental health professional there's this hierarchy where the professional's up here and the client is down there, and kind of having a level playing field. I think that there are some professionals who kind of have this idea that they know what's right, and their care isn't person-centered. And so she also talked about how she talked about her privilege as someone who is a U.S. citizen, and how her client is contending with their undocumented status. And so acknowledging those things and really just being open about what role each person has in that room. And so I think that humanizing yourself, but also acknowledging your own privileges can be really effective and helpful when someone is seeking your support.
Before I answer that question, thank you, dear. I want to assure everybody that has submitted a question that my friends and I would be more than happy either to answer it in person. We would love for you to come up to us during lunch or on breaks after. And if not, we will respond through email, and I will post it directly, on the website, because I think answers would benefit all of us, right? For me, my therapist was literally, she changed not just my mind, but my life and my heart, right? And the point at which at the pivotal moment in our relationship was at the time when I was going through the darkest of my depressions, pregnant again the second time, not any understanding about the correlation between depression and, my hormonal cycles, and feeling like an absolute failure in life, and had received a letter from my mother that said, if only you prayed with a pure heart, you wouldn't be depressed the way you are. I love my mother. She's a woman of faith, and she and I, we're really, really close, but we're not educated about mental health. And so it was a dark, dark time in my life, literally like a prisoner in my own home. And that particular session, she shared her husband's struggles with depression. He was also a therapist with a PhD, a PsyD. And that was the moment I said, therapists can also have their own struggles. And if she trusted enough to share your husband's struggles with me, that's above and beyond the call of duty with all the HIPAA rules that we have these days, right? And so it made me trust her even more, that she understood my struggles.
So each of you have alluded to this in some way, this next question. How did each of you navigate the involvement of family members in your road to recovery, especially those family members who don't have a concept of mental health?
For me, it was, we're just going to make it easier, go down there. It was many years after I decided to become an advocate that I had the opportunity to go back home to Bangalore, India, my hometown, and the psychiatrist that had diagnosed me was facilitating that evening's program. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people there, people that we knew in the community. It was the first time that I'd invited my parents to be in the audience, and my husband and his family, and I was having panic attacks all morning, and my parents said, honey, we don't have to do this, we don't have to be there, and I said, no, we need to do this. And I remember, the psychiatrist, the facilitator, starting out with asking my parents, requesting them to stand up and honoring them for giving birth to me. And in a culture like India, where there's so much shame, we have one of the highest rates of depression, one of the highest rates of suicide in the world. And parents are so heartbroken that it is their fault. It is their fault that their child is sick. They don't know how to protect the child. They don't know how to provide for that child. They don't know how to protect her from not just the disease, but the society around that is going to shame and discriminate her and the family for the rest of their lifetimes and for generations to come. So it was a big moment for my parents to be honored in that way. But it was really at the end of the event that my mother hugged me and cried, and she said, I'm sorry. And I said, why, Mom? Everything went well, right? She said, yes, honey. But when you were going through these struggles and you decided to go and get an MBA, I dreamed for you to climb the corporate ladders of America and make millions of dollars for yourself. And then you chose to become a social entrepreneur. And I was so ashamed of you. It's like, what is wrong with my child? And this evening, I witnessed the vision you had for yourself. This gift you call hope that you give people, money can't buy. And I, as a parent, had failed to see the worth and the value of your vision. It was that moment that not just for my mother and my father, but for the rest of my family, that it became clear that what I do isn't for people to listen to our story, not my story, with pity or with horror, but with humanity and with hope. And they are my biggest champions today.
When I was in high school, I felt very depressed, and I started Googling what depression was, because I had some idea of that. I thought, like, I think I have this. And so I remember just doing as much research as I could, and then telling my mom that I wanted to see a therapist. And that didn't really go as well as I planned. She just was like, why? Like, just tell us what's going on. Like, you're not going to tell other people, you know. I mean, for the Latinos in here, like, you don't want to be like chismosa and just like share all your business and stuff like that. And so I was just like, okay. But I had to really understand where she was coming from. And I think that this is something I'm still working on, trying to humanize my mother, trying to see her as an individual, as a person, and trying to hear what she was going through. And years later, we had discussions where I tried to see what she went through, and I learned in the process that she had attempted suicide as a teenager as well. And so to be able to find those points of relation with her and to tell her that this is something that I needed to do for myself, I think was really important. Also, it's funny because I remember when I finally was able to go to therapy, afterwards I was just so excited, and I was like, oh my God, Ma, like we talked about this and we talked about that, and like, you know, I learned this. And then she was like, oh, so your therapist is basically blaming me for everything. She's a bitch, don't go back to her. And I was just like, I was like, okay, I'm not telling her what I talk about in therapy anymore. But I did realize that, again, like family is so important, and so I said, okay, well, I can tell her, hey, we talked about, I don't know, I had a school assignment, or like a friend of mine in school like annoyed me, but like trying to make it very general so she still felt like I was sharing that part of my life with her. Because I feel like as what she's going through, like she wants to feel needed, and I want to be able to do that for her. And so just letting her know that I'm what's going on in my life, but to an extent. So really instituting boundaries, which I'm still working on, but I think that's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. Boundaries, yeah, that's good. I had to learn that. I think for me, as it relates to family, let me see, family, that's a tough one. I had to think about my mother. You know, I have a mother that battled alcohol addiction, and she's over 20-something years in sobriety. And I think about my mom. I thought about my mom, and I just thought about, like, she goes places and she's social and she's the life of a party, and she doesn't need to have a drink. I thought about her strength, because, you know, when you're going through your challenges, you look to people to attach to. For me, Zeta Catherine Jones was the first person with bipolar. So I wanted to read everything that, in my mind, that I heard speak publicly. So I wanted to read everything about her. So I'm looking for, how do I relate to family? How do I get strength? I said, wow, when my mother was going through rehab, my mother, part of her rehab, she said she had to write letters to people, and she had to apologize and put that out there. So when I was going through my struggles and getting strong, I said, you know what? There's relationships with family and friends that I've damaged. And, you know, I need these people in my life. But when I talked to my mother about it, she said, you have to understand, when you do this, you take this step, it's a great step to take. It's taking responsibility, but some people aren't going to accept that. And it's true, that's what happened. Now, I'm telling these people, hey, you know what? I don't remember doing this to you. I know you told people that it hurt you. And I've had friends, close friends since childhood, say, mental illness isn't real. I don't believe that shit. Bottom line. We stop being friends. It's not until we grow up, right? And this person has a kid, or this person is impacted through a family member or something, that they come back to the other side. And it's crazy how life works. They'll hit me up. This happened with close friends, as I said. It's happened with media people, because they wrote things about me, labeling me, calling me crazy and things, and then it flips back where they're like, you know, I want to say sorry. My wife, she's battling with depression. I didn't know about this. And I've had those friends that walked away, and they're like, man, you know, it's hit my father, it's hit my cousin, and I understand now what you're going through. So, you know, it's just been kind of me being, I guess, sincere, wanting to heal, wanting to be open, that drew these people back, and I've been able to educate them. So now they're on my team, and they're like out there advocating for change like me.
Yay. This is so emotional. I need to watch Magic Mike and also eat some ice cream later today. This is rough. So I'm still struggling. I think that's why I became a performer, because I felt like the most honest conversations I was having with my family was them sitting in the audience, held hostage, while I performed. And it's that catch. What is that? That you know, when I was like shameful, but it's free. Shameful, but it's free. For my mom, it's like, this is totally shameful, but look at all the grants she's getting, and look at all these audience members and the press she's getting. It's so shameful. But so it's this weird, crazy thing that's how I've been able to negotiate. I think my parents have come a long way. They've lightened up a lot. It's still hard for them to. They're still my parents. It's still hard for them to watch it. watch my shows and stuff, but they like my newer shows, which meant to them not at all. They're like, keep touring that one. We like that one. But that's, I mean, so much of what I do now is about like performing for people in order to have an honest conversation with them.
Look who's here! You're back! While Susie gets settled in, I do want to make another call, an invitation to every single peer in the audience, every single person living with a mental health condition. Go out there during lunch, pick up your My Story, My Superpower t-shirt, put it on, proud and tall, come meet me here at 1240, right here at the stage. The photo shoot is just the start of a journey that we're all going to go on. We're going to change the world.
So after today, how many of you feel like you're ready to share your story that you haven't shared yet with anybody? So wait, so could you guys just stand up a second? You, who wants to? 1, 2. So how many do we have? 2, 4. So this is amazing. I wonder what inspired you. Can we ask one of you to come right over here? What do you think has inspired you to want to share your story? Here's the mic. I'm putting you totally on the spot. How do you like that?
Hello, thank you everyone. I think what has really inspired me to share my story is just my journey in getting help and just going to therapy, and much like you said, the change that people see in me is attracting them in. Even if they don't necessarily understand the mental health condition, they do see the night and day reaction. They do see that I'm coping. They do see that my life is progressing in a way that it never had before, kind of when I was carrying those weights. So just knowing that if I can change the minds of the people who are closest to me, I just know that I could help others do that as well.
And one last thing, like I wanted to add that's been really a gift from my whole journey, and hopefully you guys will look at things like this in your own life. So after I was outed and everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people knew my story, they were shaming me and judging me, and I even had somebody write in telling me I should kill myself, like my brother did, calling me just the worst whore, slut, you're the worst person in the world. And when you get that negative feedback from people, you have to understand that it's about them. And I really had a person write into me, shaming me, and I usually don't respond to trolls, but for some reason this letter just hit me that I needed to respond, and I just responded in a nice way. Sorry you feel this way, unfortunately you're judging, and I just kind of went on, but in a very nice way. I didn't expect the gentleman to write back, and he wrote back saying how he was sexually abused in his childhood, and just telling me his story. But his way was to lash out because of his own pain. So just remember that. So whether you want to let those people in your life or not, I feel that judging should not even exist in this world. And when we judge, that's, again, our own pain. So if you know of anybody judging somebody, you're sitting by them, I mean, it could be the silliest thing, like, God, can you believe her shoes are like 8 inches high? What's her problem? You say, you know, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel the need to be negative about that person you don't even know? Put it on them, and realize there's no need to hurt other people. It's because of your own pain that you feel that need to lash out. And I know this audience is not like that at all, but we can help educate other people that feel that need to do that, and we can make it a better place. Michael Jackson song. Isn't that like a Michael Jackson song? The Man in the Mirror, yep.
Okay, you can start.
I keep the mic.
So it's along those lines, Susie, how does everyone on the panel recommend correcting or just talking to people who have a negative view of mental health?
Do you want me to go first? Yeah, sure. Okay, because I'm holding. I think if somebody has this negative view, they're obviously uneducated, and maybe you just reflect and, you know, hopefully you'll change your opinion. If you don't, that's your own choice. But actually, mental illness is like cancer, and we treat people with cancer with dignity and respect. If the neighbor has cancer, we're going to go over, hopefully, and bring them the casserole. With mental health or mental illness, you don't go over and bring them the casserole. So let's start looking at this in a different light and really treating these people the way they deserve.
Thank you, Susan. I'm not a comedian. You got a gift, Christina. But you know, there was, one time I was on. Yes, you absolutely have a gift. I was on a flight. I do a fair amount of traveling, and you know, somebody else sitting next to me. What do you do? Is always the first question, right? It's like, well, I'm a mental health advocate. Oh, are you going to analyze me? Are you going to do this? And then next, the question was, are you dangerous? I really, this was the only time my comic streak did come through. I just looked him straight in the eye, and I said, not unless it is in self-defense.
I guess just really thinking about where the person's coming from and trying to be compassionate with them, which I know can be very hard, because if someone completely just dismisses your experience and doesn't see you, one can get defensive. But I think maybe to just show more compassion and trying to see where they're coming from, like what makes you feel that way, and trying to open a conversation, I think can be really important, and seeing what kind of information you can impart to them. And in terms of the dangerous part, like people with mental illness are more likely to be the victims, not the perpetrators. So I think that's something that people really need to share with everyone as much as possible. Yeah.
Now, being an athlete, I'm used to a lot of people asking me my opinion, and then when I state it, they want to argue with me, you know, because everybody, I'm like, why do you ask me my opinion on anything if you want to, like, disagree with me? But I believe, you know, with mental health, like, I know it's something like religion, it can make people uncomfortable. I'm proud to share, you know, my journey. I'm proud to share the journeys of others. Like, each time I'm out, I get to learn of someone else's story, you know, that may relate to someone that I know or meet that's going through it, and you just continue to share. The art of storytelling, is so many people, you know, brave individuals now that are stepping forth. And I learned from an 8-year-old at one clinic that I helped that Selena Gomez was the #1 followed person on social media. How many of y'all knew that? Raise your hand. All right, very, very few. The #1, that means she beats the Kardashians, right? And I say that to say, when we start talking about emotions and feelings, this 8-year-old was like explaining, you know, we had a child psychologist there, how like she gets anxious when her parents ask her to do something, and she gets sad, and she said, but it's okay because Selena Gomez, who this little kid follows or somehow, some way, got help because she had lupus and it made her depressed, and she went to get help, and I'm going to be okay. And so now I'm able, from an 8-year-old, to take this story when I'm in these high schools and stuff and share it with the young kids. And if they believe if Selena Gomez can do it, they can do it too.
A lot of the misunderstanding and experiences is cultural, right? We got through it without having to pay a stranger. Why do you need this? And I think a lot of where that's shifting is the faces, like our faces, that are speaking out about it. More media changing the face of what depression looks like, and more cultural competency is being taught to providers, which I think is so important in terms of how to outreach communities, because it is so intimidating. There's so much misinformation. Obviously, my mom had misinformation that you go see a therapist, it'll report it to your employer, your life will be over, or it'll affect your immigration status, or it'll affect, you know, whatever. And I think that thinking if you're in the position to make media around it or to report on it, who are the people what are the communities that you can reflect? And so for me, I didn't have Chinese language communities come to my show, but it was really meaningful when Chinese language press came to interview me, because it felt like that was a community that that if they're willing to do the translation in their articles, that is a way to reach them. Another thing that I found really helpful in touring this is a counselor had said, it's really important to not be like, go see a therapist, you need therapy. Like, of course, that's how I think in this room we know that's obviously therapy shaming people is not the way to go. But to be an ally with a friend, like, can I walk you to your appointment? Can I help make the call for you? I think that was something that just blew my mind and wanted to pass forward here.
Can I say something real quick? You know what's pretty cool like about being up here right now is like I've gotten to do a lot of this stuff for, you know, our country, Olympic stuff and military, but I've never sat on a diverse panel like this. So yeah, this is awesome to see the different representation, you know, because it's hard when you're going out and, you know, I don't know if y'all experienced this in your community, so I'm out. And a lot of times I get backlash. Oh, you're out. You're never with any people of color and things of that. And it kind of bothers me because I do a lot for the kids. In some situations, I can't post pictures of the kids because the kids are in the system. They're going through things, they're foster care, blah, blah. But yeah, it's hard when people see you. They see me as a black woman, always with rooms full of white people. And I'm like, no, I speak to all different people, but it's understanding that a lot of the resources, you know, I was recently with Representative Joe Kennedy, and he's like, unfortunately, a lot of, you know, people of color don't have resources, and it's hard right now with the government, like, cutting funding. And then he made a great point. He's like, Shamika, he's like, think about this. The top three mental health facilities are where? What cities? New York, LA, and Chicago. And he said, guess what? They're the prisons. That's the prisons. You know, so it's just, yeah, I just wanted to share that. That was on my heart.
Thank you, Shamika. Yeah, this was a dream of mine to present true diversity, because I know what true loneliness and isolation is like. And if we have experienced that isolation, there are millions more that are, and are doing it in silence. And so it's a privilege to be sitting alongside with all of my sisters here and all of you in the room here today, because we are the true representation of the world, not just here, but the world outside. And I thank you all for making it possible.
How are we doing on time? Time? How are we doing on time? 4 after, okay. Just one more quick question. Just like a, yeah, really fast, like a 2-word answer. This will be challenging. What do you envision for the future of mental health care?
Much greatness.
Love and compassion.
Just one word, equity.
Yeah, I would like to see, well, 2 words, sorry. Let's say government budget, same, yeah, government budget.
Free, never easy to access.
Enjoy your lunch.
Thank
I
you.
will see my peers back here at 12:40. And we have a musical treat at 12:45. Enjoy your lunch.